Okay, good afternoon everyone. I'm Kumar Sambhav and I'm the founder of Land Conflict Watch and NetCraft Social Data Lab. We work a lot on data around environmental issues. So I'll be the host for you today, and we have with us an exceptional panel representing government, industry, civil society, and the voices of communities as well. We'll hear the voices that sit at the heart of India's energy transition. So the session is titled Reimagining Land Governance in India's Renewable Energy Future, and the intention is very deliberate. The intention is to move beyond identifying problems and instead explore solutions. What could be the structural, institutional, participatory, and community-centric solutions, right? But in order to make sure that we are not spending too much time on understanding the challenges, and yet we are broadly on the same page, I will try and put in context the core challenges that we have been coming across or identified through the work of very learned panel here and otherwise, so that we know that these are the main challenges that we are dealing with, and then we can sort of start discussing what could be the way forward from there. Just to lay down the context, so we have, India has over 500 gigawatt of renewable energy target by 2030. And if you see, each megawatt, according to the government's own estimate, requires about 4 acres of land. That basically means that even if a fraction of this capacity is at utility scale, we are talking about land footprint that spans entire districts, right? So that's the kind of land we are looking at for renewable energy. And in a country like India, where land is scarce and there's so many sort of competing demands, we naturally are facing a lot of challenges with land governance for renewable energy. In some of our work at Land Conflict Watch, we documented from across the country 40 land conflicts, large land conflicts that are arising out of renewable energy projects. They affect close to 50,000 people. They also span over about 32,000 hectares of land. Over about 21 gigawatt of planned RE capacity is sort of affected by these conflicts, and over about 7.3 gigawatt is already stalled because of land conflicts. So, right, we're dealing with a major challenge around land. Just quickly, I think 3-4 things that have come out from the collective work that many of us have done. One, the real story around land for renewable energy revolves around commons. Unlike other sort of industries or extractives, which are either sort of concentrated in forests where mining, etc. happens, or private land acquisition is a major factor in infrastructure development projects, RE requires barren land, which is largely comes through commons, which is pastures, grazing land, etc., which sit at the center of marginalized communities. Right? So these are living landscape for many marginalized communities. Then comes the major problem around that is wasteland, which is a colonial misnomer. Just because commons do not generate revenue for the government, they are categorized as wasteland, but now seen as land which is waste. In India, no land is waste, and I think we will come to that discussion as well. These are again, I think, biodiversity hotspots, grazing lands, and livelihood sort of resilient backbone for a lot of marginalized communities. Then there is problem of unregulated land aggregation and acquisition, which is a big growing risk. There are price distortion because aggregators work, land agents work to sort of acquire land from marginalized communities and then sell it at a much higher price. There is information asymmetry. And then one big issue is again the missing assessment of renewable energy projects. There is, the RE projects are exempted from EIA, Environmental Impact Assessment, because these are clean, green energy projects which are the priority and they should be. And we know that there are a lot of problems with the existing EIA infrastructure as well, but what it leads to is that there is no sort of one place, or there is no transparency, or there is no public consultation because there is no EIA. That's the only existing mechanism which sort of lets communities be consulted in project development in India. There is SIA as well, but because Land Acquisition Act is bypassed in many of these projects, land is either bought through private purchase or through aggregators. Again, the social impact assessment is also sort of bypassed in the process. So there is virtually non-existent consultation with communities. So that is a big problem, and again, there is no transparency because there is no information that would otherwise come out from SIAs or EIAs in public domain. And of course, there is the courts can't solve problem. In our research also, we looked at that many conflicts which were actually decided by the courts were still sort of living and happening on the ground. So unless you involve communities in decision making, alone court orders would not suffice for resolving conflicts. So with this context, I will sort of lead to our panel, and what we're trying to do right now is, in this context, we're trying to explore how can government plan and govern land better for RE projects, how can industry reduce risk through responsible siting, how can communities be equal partners and not afterthoughts, and what governance models from the global south offer hope for us to take this work forward. Now, I will sort of quickly introduce my panelists here. The chair is for the session is Mr. Shrikant Jalkare. He is the former executive director of Maharashtra State Electricity Distribution Company. Welcome, sir. We have Mr. Devi Prasad Mishra. He is the vice president and head of energy, farming, biofuel circle. And we have Ms. Bhargavi Rao. She is an independent researcher and senior fellow on the Impact and Policy Research Institute. We have Mr. Simran Grover, founder and CEO, Center for Energy, Environment and People. And we have Ms. Nicole Almeida, Program Associate, Council on Energy, Environment and Water. What I'm going to do is I'm going to come to each one of you in 3 rounds. Specific to your work, we'll set the context and challenges that you see in the RE sector and land governance from your work. Then we'll sort of discuss opportunities moving forward and what really you feel is the solution or the way forward for really just an equitable land governance for RE. I'll start with you, sir, Mr. Jalkare. As the chair of the session, we have the privilege of having you. Please tell us, from your 4 decades across distribution, load dispatch, and RE integration, what do you see as the key land governance gaps affecting renewable energy rollout? Are the constraints primarily institutional coordination, lack of spatial planning, or fundamental issues around land governance, such as what I discussed, the misclassification of commons as wastelands?
Yeah. Good afternoon to all. Here, quickly introduce me to you. This is renewable energy. We are taking the target of 500 gigawatt by year 2030. By changing this target, one of the major problems that will come across is the land, definitely land. The required land for solar projects, even for wind projects, and for other also RE projects, the required land is not available. So in this today's section, without discussing any problems in acquiring the land, I would like to share the success story of Maharashtra with you all people, and how the land for 16,000 megawatt capacity has been acquired and procured by Maharashtra. That story I would like to share with you all people. So if the story is clear to you, then how to mitigate that particular challenge that can be discussed. Can you please show my presentation? I am sure.
Can you use the mic? For the recording. We don't have a mic.
Mic is not required.
But can you share it now? We don't have the presentation.
It is all on the WhatsApp.
My WhatsApp. Yeah. So, sir, while we're setting it up,
Yes.
just want to keep talking about that project, and then we'll just keep set it up.
Actually, if you look at the scenario of the state of Maharashtra, you will find that it is having highest number of agriculture consumers in the state of Maharashtra. There are around about 55 lakhs of agriculture connections in Maharashtra, with 10 million of farmers in the overall state. So, taking into consideration of the present power scenario, it was not possible to supply them daytime power due to certain constraints in the power situation. So, what actually the Maharashtra was doing, it was supplying half of the load during daytime and half of the load during the night time. So, kind of the electricity was supplied on a rotational basis. For 3 days it is given during daytime, and during 3 days it is given during the night. So naturally, this was a very big problem in the Maharashtra. Farmers has to go to the field in the night hours, so they were as such facing a lot of problems while irrigating their land. So, in order to solve this particular difficulty, our Honorable Chief Minister came across his visionary idea of providing Mukhyamantri Saur Krishi Yojana. Under this Mukhyamantri Saur Krishi Yojana, around about 16,000 megawatt capacity has been added as a distributed article through a solar project. But for 16,000 megawatt,
Sir, actually, I can come back to you on the
Yeah.
success story in the next round when we're talking opportunities. Is there any specific challenge that you want to pick?
the challenge is that for 16,000 megawatt, around about 60,000 acre land is required. And as such, acquiring such a huge quantum of a land itself is a very big problem. You know that land prices are escalating like anything. Of course, there is not only private ownership on the land, there is the government ownership is also there. So land is bifurcated in a number of categories. So acquiring the land for the project was the biggest challenge that we faced for this 16,000. Now, how this particular challenge was mitigated, there are certain different kinds of methodology we adopted for mitigating this particular problem.
Right. So thank you so much. I think that's actually the predominant narrative that land is expensive, land acquisition is a problem, and as I laid out that one understanding that because land acquisition is considered expensive and difficult, there are other many models that, as I think Bhargavi and Simran will also point out, which are used to bypass the whole process of land acquisition. So I come to you, Bhargavi. In your research in several sites across India, how do you think RE siting decisions misunderstand living realities of land use, right? What are the mismatches between what the state classifies as the existing use of land, including wasteland, etc., and how communities actually depend on these landscapes?
Namaste to everyone. I'll start by saying that
Yeah, we don't have mics. Can you speak louder? Those are just for recording.
these are
Yeah, we don't have mic. I think we just have to speak louder.
maybe you could switch off the fan. Yeah, I'll start by saying that the way RE is unfolding in the country is very unconstitutional. Because the 73rd Amendment that was brought way back in 1992 very clearly envisaged that non-conventional energy could be something that could grow within our panchayats. So starting from there, if we look at what is happening now, the 11th schedule is where the non-conventional energy. So under the 11th schedule, there are some 29 points. But one such is the non-conventional energy. But what has happened today, state after state, land is being appropriated, one, keeping the panchayats away, sidelined. Panchayats are actually reduced to giving a NOC, that's it. And then Land Acquisition Act, for which civil society worked in India, brought in some good amendments in 2010, 2013, 2015. That Land Acquisition Act is put in cold storage. We have found newer ways to appropriate land, and these are the lease method, direct purchase method, and then you even use violence and grab the land away from the poorest of the poor. looking at the kind of land, like Kumar mentioned, it is grasslands, it is sacred groves, it is forest patches. And if you look at all these different landscapes, these are areas which don't have strong legal protection in our country. Grasslands, for instance, do not have any international agreement to protect grasslands. Whereas we have something for wetlands, not that we are protecting our wetlands where all our Ramsar sites are threatened. That's a different question, but grasslands don't have any protection like that. So similarly, all other patches as well. So what we have done is, we've, with a sweeping move at the MOEFCC level, with an office memorandum that said that RE projects do not require an environmental clearance, these weak patches of land which don't have strong protection are being diverted. But it is these very lands on which a large community of people depend on for their lives and livelihoods, and they are getting displaced. They are not part of the public consultation process. They don't have any negotiation power. Many of them are not even lettered, so they don't even understand these documents, and the documents are not in the local language. So what we call as free prior informed consent is zero, and they are literally being pushed out. And this is translating into migration. It is distress migration, and then just 2 weeks back we had the Global Hunger Index report, which has put India at a serious concern point. So that just shows what is happening in the country in the context of, in the name of climate change, how we are displacing people. And this is no different from what we did with coal or other, projects.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Madhuri. Similarly, want to add what are the trends that you're seeing, especially in your work in Rajasthan, RE corridors. What are the triggers that you see that are causing friction around land with communities, industry, government?
I think between you and Marjorie, much is covered, but just building on the nuance. So there are broadly two ways in which land is a developer gets land, right? Either it's a public land, which then government allocates or develops, right? Or it's a private land, which as Bhargavi rightly mentioned, there is no other application. States have removed land selling limit. So it becomes a private party transaction. You can go to the ground and negotiate with each household. And in the larger context, state and particularly state renewable energy agencies, based on our engagement, have said, okay, we are not concerned. We are a single window clearance agency. Whatever conflicts happen on the ground, it's between the developers and the community and whatever stakeholders are involved. And it's up to them how they navigate that. Right? So in the process, now these two separations of public land and private land have dealt with a little bit separately. When it comes to private land, right, there is a fair amount of informality in place, right? You have middlemen who are actually getting institutionalized right now. If you go to Jaisalmer, Pokhran, etc., big companies being coming in and playing the role, monetizing and appropriating opportunities. Playing on information asymmetry, right? And informational asymmetry is very important to understand in power sector, because from the envisage of a future plan to implementation on the ground, there's a 10 years gap, right? And the information flows through our structures, social and both administrative, and there are politicians involved. If I had power and I had money, I may be on the other side of the table, appropriating that opportunities, right? So there's obvious conflicts that happen. Somebody will come in, buy land, sell it at a higher price, and then I feel cheated, right? That's a human response, etc. Right? There's also, hey, Sambhav knew more, or Sambhav is politically power, and he negotiated a better price. Then again, I felt cheated, right? So in this informality, these conflicts are common. There's other nature of conflicts also that Sambhav, you are from a privileged community, and I am from a sort of disadvantaged community. जो middleman है, वो Rajput है. And it could be any upper caste community or dominant caste. Now they are not just become facilitators of land acquisition and holder of land. They're also often the one who makes payments to these households and communities, right? So in the stages of development of a project, they will say, oh, the project has not come in yet, you continue to use the land, right? Continue to use the farming, and then we will not pay you the lease rent for this year, right? Because you're using the land anyway, right? But to you, they will pay, right? So differential of norm based on caste structure, this complexity is again, much of our understandings are also anecdotal, and it's hard to build evidence around that, frankly speaking. Thirdly, my colleagues present in the room have looked at land lease contracts. I mean, these are contracts if higher ups in the companies look at, they will lose their shit, right? They're so problematic in the legal articulation of that. They disfavor the community, definitely disfavor the community, but they are also a risk to the business directly, right? If they end up in the court of law, it could spell disaster. The only thing is, I mean, in most cases, people don't have access to courts. It can be suppressed. So there's the degree of risk may be less, the perceived risk, but the day it ended up in court of law, it may create problems for the developers and the financial investment.
Can you give examples of some of the
Yeah, very
problems?
simple, right? I mean, you are leasing land from me, right? You are basically saying that if you want to sell the project, your lease will get transferred, your lease rights will get transferred. But if I have to sell my land, and with that the lease agreement rights will get transferred to that cannot happen. I will have to ask permissions for you, right? So similarly, there are various nuanced violations in terms of intimation, in terms of treatment of land, end of life, for example. One is a larger question of it says that it will be returned in the same condition, but nobody has measured the baseline. We don't know what was the condition when the project was installed. So what does the same condition means? But beyond that, it is the owners after 25 years. It is the owners of the household who signed the agreement, lease the land, to write to the company formally to do the treatment of the land within 3 months. Otherwise, the company can say it's not my responsibility. So there is disproportionate placements of responsibility and few others nuances, which again my colleagues will better position to comment on, could be legally problematic, right? Now moving to public land very quickly. As Bhargavi was already mentioned, there are competing use. Right? There are competing use not on this on public land, but in yesterday's session, my colleague Anuj very well articulated. In pastoral traditional societies, there are competing use on private land also. For example, traditionally pastoralists do use private lands for right of way, for feeding on agriculture waste, etc., and then the process, providing manure and taking to those land. There's a rich ecosystem around pastoralists providing veterinary services, not just for their own livestock, but also livestock of the rich, larger landholders. So there's a shift, cultural, economic shift also happening in the product. In the process, again, issues I'm not the best person to speak about there, but Rajasthan, particularly being a princely state, and the sort of the land governance that is evolved from that, there are historical contestations around that, right? Oran's Sumer Singh is sitting at the back, leads the Degrai Oran Bachao Samiti, huge campaign to protect the largest Oran, 75,000 acres, if I'm not wrong, in Jaisalmer, right? That's a huge contestation. But beyond Orans, there's a lot that's invisibilized in terms of small pastures, etc., pathways, your water resources, etc. And contestation to the extent, I mean, it's also complex. And the 7-8 villages that I visited, Orans are also encroached, right? Where people have to. Where villages have not been allocated on their Abadi lands, residential lands have not been enlarged, the new education has not happened. The people are also forced to encroach their places and sit with the risk that, if these lands are tomorrow appropriated, what happens to us? Just, I mean, very complex, and I'm too early in my career to start making sort of, wrapping our heads around it. I think, again, there are experts in the room that I know very well who
So we'll come back to, I think, to specific examples as well, Simran. But to you, Mr. Mishra, you work extensively with degraded, marginal, and unutilized land for energy farming, especially from your experience of biomass value chains, etc. Can you help us rethink land use for large-scale solar and wind? now that you represent industry, I think what problems are emerging? How do we rethink land for RE?
Thank you for giving this opportunity. And after listening, only thing, you see the issues are saying was coming out is then we have also started working from the grassland point of view. We have the problem of the ownership of the land. We don't know where is the revenue is owning, the forest is owning, or it is a defense is owning. It was record is not. And this grassland is actually environmentally the salinity ingress going on, and the community living inside, they are losing their livelihoods and space, but there is nothing there. So somehow now I think the solars are coming down. So what I see the linear approach when we discuss about any project, we forget about the circularity. The dump sites in any city in Ahmedabad, these are the examples of the linear use patterns of our you are consuming something, you are generating somewhere and it's going and dumping somewhere. So in all these projects, we are not looking at circularity, and we are forgetting that this mother earth is actually not one species. Apart from human beings, the environment, climate, soil, microorganisms, all are creates a whole earth. And land acquisition, the requirement of land, we also require land for energy farming. But wasteland, when we are defining, we are physically defining this land is waste. But there are many ways. There is a social problem. Lots of urbanization is happening, migration is happening. Young chaps are moving out. There is nobody left in the many good villages to farm, cultivate land. Lands are available for the last 25, 30 years there. So we found some places in Odisha. We meet the people there, their panchayat. They form a committee, and they've agreed to form a FPU. So how the community participation scale, land belongs to them. They will pay as the owner of the land. Although they don't have that agricultural knowledge, capacity, or resources currently to cultivate, then we pitch it. We brought our resources, we brought our expertise, and we gave them employment. So it is a kind of circularity which is happening. And this produce is going for production of CBG.
Yeah.
So when we are talking about the RE, we are only talking about the power sector. There are also energy which are consumed by the transportation sector, industries, even our cooking domestic sector. So energy basket of India is mix of everything. So the previous discussion was going on. The RE requirement can be replaced by the 4 nuclear power plant and the 4 that will have very low land scale.
Yeah.
So if we are talking about the entire community protecting their livelihoods and the traditions, we need to look for a circularity and a recarbonization of these wastelands. So pure wastelands, what they need to recarbonize. So the CBG plants, if we put up in the wastelands, gas can be transported, but the land can be revitalized, and the residues. CBG plants produce a lot of fermented organic manures. Those manures can go to the land and reclaim. A whole lot of the recarbonization can happen, and local employment generation, everything. Solar panel actually displaces. They do not people to employ them, and you need a lot of water then to clean and everything, and this water gets lost. You are also putting a stress. So this kind of the project gives a midway to the challenges, and this can also address the energy sector, power generation also. There can be decentralized power generation from this gas also, where there is off-grid, microgrids can be set up from the methane gas.
So no, I think you made very interesting points. I think we probably good examples need to be learned from other sectors as well. Now I'll come to you, Nicole, and deliberately I'm coming to you in the end because Equal works, you work at the intersection of many stakeholders. I mean, you are part of a civil society coalition that works with industry, government, civil society, community in sort of finding ways, pathways for responsible energy. So in your work, from your engagements with different stakeholders, what does it reveal about, what do you think is the biggest disconnect between policy intent and the operational practices, especially on consent, consultation, grievance redressal, or compensation framework?
Yeah, thank you so much for inviting. So when it comes to the biggest disconnects, I think some have already been highlighted. So India has this vision of going net zero, and even if we model for nuclear, we would require around 7,000 gigawatts of renewable energy of solar and wind alone. And that translates, we were discussing in an earlier meeting that translates to around 5.4% of India's land, which is the size of Gujarat. So the scale that we're talking about to meet those long-term targets, the scale is huge. Unless, even like decentralized happens at a smaller level, unless we're able to really amplify that. The scale that we need for solar and wind is huge. While that's the policy intent, we see that renewable energy is facing a lot of on-ground issues, and as Simran said, most states have put in these single window clearances. Most states have actually left land procurement, mostly unless it's a solar park, to your developer, right? There actually, if you want to meet those targets, the state governments, the nodal agencies for renewable energy can do a lot more. And that is one of the projects that I work on. Can the state actually identify low impact sites, right? So that includes understanding what are parcels of cultural significance, what are parcels of land that might have some migratory birds, right? How can we identify? So Gujarat and Rajasthan is another case, because here a lot of the low risk sites have already been, even those low risk are not really low risk, but the sites are less. But in especially other states in India, can we actually identify those low impact sites? So here there's a huge disconnect. When you have a policy goal, but you're not actually putting in enabling systems for private sector to use those identified sites and then start deployment. Another huge problem is the setup that we have in India, which is tariff-based bidding, which has reduced the price of renewable energy to one of the lowest in the world actually in India, which really means that it's the lowest bidder wins the tariff. By doing this, we have completely ignored, say, the cost and price of your social criteria, of environment criteria. And one of the things we really want to do in the future is, can we have non-price criteria in tariff-based bidding? And it might seem like, oh my God, what is this? But this happens in Europe, right? So 30% of a state's tender capacity should come through non-price criteria, or 6 gigawatts, whichever is lower. And they have included aspects such as climate resilience, biodiversity. Can we not, through our tendering agencies, include some of these non-price criteria in the entire bidding process? Another huge problem is the developers themselves. So while there are some, these developers, these big companies, they'll have a sustainability team, they have a land team, they'll have a project development team, and say for instance, if the developer is getting international funding or finance, they have to, by any way, follow, say, IFC performance standards, ADP safeguards. They have to do one of these two. And these are not all developers. I'm just giving an example. So your sustainability team and your finance team is sure that okay, this is what we do. We take prior informed consent, and this is how it's going to go. But on ground, that doesn't really happen. And when we speak to the folks who are on ground, they'll say that your project COD commercial operation date. So you have 18 months to build your RE project. 18 to 24 months, it depends. They're like, your COD dates are so, like, it's 18 months. How do we do ESI, environment, social impact assessment? How do you make a plan? How do we get pre-prior consent, right? Which brings me back to the main point on your state and the laws of the land, right? Which are in such a structure that is not allowing for, in a way, responsible deployment. Yeah.
So I think, thank you everyone.
He can select that particular land for his project to build and understand the economics of his agri project. Because the economics of agri project totally depends on the availability of land and the price of the land. Actually, we started our journey in 2007. But farmers are getting daytime electricity. So actually, they are not farmers are getting daytime electricity. So actually, they are not losing anything. By giving their land for such distributed agriculture, they are not sacrificing anything, they are not losing anything, but on the contrary, they are gaining something, they are getting reliable and assured power.
You want to go through any of the slides specifically?
Yes, just a short, what we did in Maharashtra. Right from first.
Yeah.
Very short, huh?
Very short, 2 minutes.
2 minutes? Okay. So this is just a picture of Maharashtra. 10 million farmers are there. 4.5 million electrical education are there. They are contributing 12% of our GDP. And the total connected load is 16,000 gigawatt. Now the present situation is such that out of this 16,000 gigawatt, 8,000 megawatt, 8 gigawatt, that is 8,000 megawatt, is supplied during the night time. And once the supply is available for the night time for only for 8 hours, see the kind of problems they can experience. Lot of problems they experience because it is difficult to go into the field during the night time. So they appreciated this particular scheme. And they themselves come forward, they deposited their land in our land portal, they registered their land on our land portal, and we also provided them handsome land lease rent for their land. That too for the period of 25 years. So they are also happy. So it is an equitable solution I think we can think of.
Right. Okay.
Yes.
Any other point you want to make?
In the course of discussion I can.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you for being kind with time as well. We were already running late in the starting of the session. But if everybody's okay, we can take maybe another 15 minutes to sort of have the discussion in all sort of cover all the points around it. I'll come to you, Mr. Mishra. As Nicole also pointed out that there are cost factors that has to be sort of considered during the social environmental consideration in the project planning, and Mr. Jaldari also pointed out that everybody is concerned about the cost for the project. So, from your experience, what do you think would be the incentive for the industry to work towards more just and equitable land governance and land acquisition? How do you balance the cost and the incentive factor for working towards environmental?
Two scenarios to as a food for thought. They all RE or the environmental, they are net zero mission is going on to reduce our carbon global warming. So what is our net carbon emission as a country per capita or as a gross? Don't talk about per capita because 40-50% people are staying in those. In our total geographical area, India, still 60% of land is in agriculture. About 10% is industrial. In the entire agriculture, 60% land, do you know what is the soil carbon content? Average soil carbon? It is less than 1%. It has been reduced and vigorous control. So, if we can systematically reclaim this agricultural land itself with proper 3 times crop, the amount of carbon sink can be generated. That will definitely somewhere around 20% of carbon emission offset without doing any bushland. So what we are also trying to do decentralize and development of biochar production facilities with community and what with a scale something. So that soil carbon health can be taken as a reason to offset policy as an offset. Plus the carbon sink we develop above the soil. So an entire system can be linked to a carbon credit mechanism, which can be a greatest incentive for anybody. Second, where we are lacking, actually, this is the era India is going through a startup concept. Everybody knows about valuation, company. Have anybody has in this world ever tried to evaluate what the value of our earth, what is the valuation of our earth? We are not actually knowing what is we are losing. So when that figure will be accounted now, every investment proposal, business models will follow the chartered accountants language and the banking language. So that's two things I wanted to say at this moment. What is the incentives are lying? Westland is again 10% around Westland is again categorized Westland, where there is a lot of problems, but the recarbonization of these Westlands, developing the ecosystem. One of the major entity in India is the mining sector. When the post mining land has to be reclaimed as it is before the climate ecosystem, whatever it is there, that is a big segment where we can focus. So if we need to link to the carbon finance or carbon economy, then it will be important.
I think you make a very important point. In the consideration of the projects or planning or costing, etc., the inbuilt subsidies that actually the communities suffer are never accounted for, right? The loss of commons, the loss of livelihoods, which is actually the cost for the communities, is actually a subsidy for the projects, which is not accounted for, and something, the cost that needs to be sort of considered. I'll come to you, Nicole, again. From your vantage point, working with multi-stakeholders, again, coalitions, what practices from South Asia, Southeast Asia, or Global South that you think are worth adapting in India? How can these be operationalized at multi sort of layer stages, national, state, district level? Do you have any examples that worth sort of looking into?
Yeah, thanks. So I'll give an example a bit far from home. It's an example of this company called Renewable, which is based in Argentina, and we recently had a discussion with them through the Responsible Energy Initiative, where we invited them to know more about their project. So as we spoke a bit before about pre-informed prior consent, right? So they said that when they went to the community, they didn't have a land parcel in mind. Nobody does that. People see their, look at their computer, they find out which is the land parcel, they go there in India and all over the world, and then they discuss with the community that, who uses this land, they might do some KIs, try to understand. This company just went to a certain area and said that, went to say like the tribal population there and said that, we want to put up a X amount of plant and it would require this much land. Where do you suggest should we put this up? And then of course they said that this mountain is sacred, this is the way we get there, so it can't be here. Then they had that discussion. And so I asked them, okay, so you took informed consent before. And then they said, no, we take it till date. It's a continuous process that happens. It's not that we take it at the start and then that's it. It's a continuous process. And another thing that they did, just to give you an example, I was really mind blown when I heard this, is that they gave, the community didn't have rights to land, so they helped them get the tenancy rights, the title for land. And then they offered them that, if you want, you can, the 20 years value of the lease and like net present value of the lease, you can buy it as equity in this project. Which, I mean, there are a few projects in India, but those are very controversial. But they just offered that do you want to buy an equity, and that's how you want at least, right? Every year you will get profit from the project. So I think those are really very pioneer cases of companies that go into a certain society with a certain method. And in India, it only happens if your funder or investor asks for it. Of course, there are no government right? Regulations related to all of this because it's a wide category and no EI, etc. It only happens when your funder asks for it. And that's what we're working through the Responsible Energy Initiative. Can we speak to more investors and financiers to ask for some of these community related aspects as well as environment related aspects? And at the same time, you have a lot of these companies who say they want to go net zero, right? So we are also working with them. They are procurers of energy. Can we also nudge these procurers ask, can you tell us how you acquire land? Do you have free prior consent? Was this the lowest risk site that you could identify, right? So we're trying to approach this by looking at what is the current ecosystem. There is of course regulation, right? And that's a different ballgame. But to work with what we have right now and what can be actionable immediately on the field, because in the next few years we're going to see a lot of large scale projects, right? We feel that working with this ecosystem of those who procure energy and the people who invest in energy, which also includes commercial banks in India, can we nudge them to move in this direction?
I think you very well laid out some of the models that could be working. There's benefit sharing, there's participatory mapping for the site, there's collective negotiation as well involved, and some of the co-ownership model also are existing. Bhargavi, you have also looked at many community-led projects, or some at least, in your sort of quest to find problems. You might have come across solutions as well. Which approaches do you think show early signs of improving trust and reducing conflict? And what conditions help them actually work?
So the community initiative ones are very small and taken up by individual homes and farms and things like that. But let's look at the big problem. 500 gigawatts is the big commitment we have made. And we have about 2,68,000 panchayats in the country. And for every megawatt, you need 3 to 5 acres. So doing a simple math, 2 megawatts per village, per panchayat will help reach that target. And that 2 megawatts need not be solar, it could be hybrid, it could be anything that the local panchayat imagines as renewable, right? So that would be the way to go, and that would give complete freedom to the panchayat to decide which land they want to park, how they want to divert it, what kind of energy model they want to put it there. That would be reimagining this entire journey ahead, because moving ahead, you don't want to leave, another large population without food and shelter, and we are seeing what's happening in big cities. And I think what Nicole said is also very important. The industries, as part of the same discussion with the Responsible Energy Initiative, in many of the conversations we had found that the industries are saying we are, learning by doing. It is not that they were against it, probably. So maybe if they can work directly with the panchayats, that would, again open up opportunities. And I think we always think that big is the way to go. Big means progress. That is a, illusion. We need to change that. And another problem is the parastatal. Every state today has created a parastatal to look into renewable energy. I think that power has to be given back to the panchayats, and they have to work with the forest departments, the central groundwater board, and other agencies to determine the local water drainage pattern. Because in Pavagada we've seen a part of the park gets flooded and the panels are all underwater every time there's a bad rain. The same thing happened in Reva also. So looking at that, I think involving all those agencies and working with the panchayat and the people is the way to go.
Yeah. No, I think very some important points that you raised about citing and communities work. We come back to. I have a few questions specifically on what's stopping at least from for the state or the industry to not adopt these sort of mechanisms. In fact, from our discussions with some of the industry players, you rightly said that they may not be against it. In fact, many of the industry players actually mentioned that these plots that are allotted to them through computer, as you pointed out, and Chattari, you also said that there is a land bank where people can identify. In some examples, actually the industry is given the land parcel, they go on the ground and realize that it is not as encumbrances free as it was made out to be in the computer database of land bank, right? It's called encroachment.
Yeah.
It could be the commons where marginalized communities are living and sustaining on. So the whole idea of encroachment on commons is a much debated concept as well. There is a narrative versus reality debate as well. So I think those problems when industry faces, they are also saying we didn't know about this. So I think they are also saying that no, can you tell us better what land we should go to and what and then they don't have a solution to it. So there is increasing acknowledgement of the problem of wastelands, commons, or the land bank reality not being acknowledged at the planning stage within the industry because investments are stuck in conflicts. And that is also a big incentive to address these issues, address community issues, because nobody wants their investments to get stuck in conflicts. So, Simran, your experience, I mean, you have very extensive work on institutional mechanisms in power sector and governance issues. Do you see any early signs of acknowledgement in the institutional mechanism, governance, or which could work, or there is some sort of acknowledgement or working towards some more community engaged siting or development of projects?
Yeah. Unfortunately, okay, there's an acknowledgement is that there's a challenge, right? Both for solar project development as well as, more importantly, for transmission infrastructure, right? And that's more complex, and we're not going to that. But there's an acknowledgement, and there's an acknowledgement that prices are going up, right? Is that something that the state should be concerning itself with, especially when pricing are going up in rural economies? Right, your money is going to rural economy. I mean, my 2 crore flat is expensive in Jaipur, right? The 2 lakh per acre land is not expensive. I'm sorry, right? Especially when it is being appropriate to supply electricity to me and my peers, right? So there's a larger development justice questions, and unfortunately, the discourse on RE is murdered, as is the core case with all development work and major development projects. It's green, it's climate action, it's jobs and whatnot, right? Including national security. I've heard one of senior IS officers telling me on face, actually CW was in the room, that the person who put the GIB case in Supreme Court was an anti-national, right? And unfortunate as it is, but it, definitely the Supreme Court judgment, the context in which came, how it completely ignored the ecocentric view, how it ignored the direct mandate of the government for environmental protection, and took an interpretive view on Article 17, saying that defining the right of protection against adverse effects of climate action in the case, which is highly debatable, and why it is not implying to new thermal plants being developed, waste energy plants being developed. The vehicle pollution in Delhi, how Delhi's protesters is also being sort of, being dismissed and pushed back. Now, these are the fundamental questions I think we need to engage with other democratic society. Right? Unfortunately, there are no institutional mechanisms. The role of government does not seem to be. See, safeguards have to be there when there's an asymmetry in power, right? If everybody equal, you could have a more very functional capitalist market, but that is not the case, right? Information plays a huge role, marginalization plays a huge role, safeguards are important, but social justice does not seem to be the mandate of the government. Government thinks, in my limited understanding and not an academic by any stretch of length, that the development will deliver social justice, and development is infrastructure growth, infrastructure development, etc. So fundamental issues there, right? And as Nicole also pointed out, the space for delivering the justice, even for the company, is not there. Two reasons. Structurally, when you get into the bid, so basically somebody like SECI or any state agency will invite bids, right? And tell you do your due diligence, impact assessment, risk assessment, whatever you do, right? Now 10 players will participate. I can't speculatively do risk assessment, not knowing what's the chances of conversion, etc. I can't just go every project doing an EIA, which is a complex, expensive process, right? And it takes time. So the invitation to the bid to do your own risk assessment is unfortunately yes, right? So and the merge structural change that needs to be there. That independent, community inclusive, transparent, and as transparent, like throw everybody thing in your face kind of transparency is what is needed. Where everybody is really informed, even who does not understand the language, looking at the endangered issues of information, etc., caste issues and whatnot, right? And be funded by the public, and then the cost can be transferred to the public, right? That's a structural shift that is needed to have any sense of mitigating these conflicts beforehand, because once the bid is done, it is practically the race to the bottom, right? That's what the the bidding reverse bidding mechanism is, which means that now the companies have already made some investments on the ground. They will make more. In the process, they will realize risk. If they can pay for their risk within project budgets, great. Other than they will definitely try to navigate it through informalities, through local power structures which become prominent, which is often the case with banks. You have, if you go to Rajasthan, you have political people becoming extremely powerful, and you are talking about a contrast where the Sarpanch and his family has three major, very, very expensive SUVs, right? Including all these are becoming common. Second hand doesn't matter, right? In the same region where even to get an ambulance, people have to pool 3,000 rupees so that the ambulance service can come to that outcast community because the panchayat ambulance is not for them.
Right. So no, thank you for that. And I think we're just running out of time. We'll open up for questions, but before I do, quickly, like a very lightning speed, one comment from each one of you in say 30-40 seconds, please. So, Mr. Mishra, what do you think is the one voluntary standard that the RE company should adopt to make land governance more fair and just?
Inclusiveness.
Okay. Nicole, one coordination mechanism India needs for responsible, inclusive RE land governance.
I'd like to think that there is an intent of companies to be more responsible. It's in self-benefit, it will be smoother project deployment, it will be better ESG ratings. To enforce it at the start, I think more coordination between procurers, investors, and financiers with these developers.
Bhargavi, one safeguard that must be non-negotiable for vulnerable communities in RE land decisions.
Their lives and livelihoods, so RE has to coexist with local environments.
Simran, one institutional reform that could genuinely center the communities at the heart of transition.
I would say two very, very quickly. One is complete public disclosures of any long-term infrastructure development and integrated with the pre-bid EIA.
Sir, as the chair, I'll let you have the last word. One actionable state-level reform that could immediately reduce land disputes and conflicts around that.
Yeah. In the case of Maharashtra, we intended to build up the 16,000 megawatt capacity in the period of 8 years. So we all know for 16,000 megawatt, we need land to the tune of 64,000 acres, which itself is a huge land requirement. I am proud to say, in Maharashtra, we have acquired 50,000 acres of land for all these. So, going through my experience, I can only comment and say two things. One thing is that government intervention is required in completing. If at all we want to achieve the target of 100 gigawatt by the end of 2030, particularly for this land aspect, government intervention will be required, government willingness and will be required to make this project successful. That is the first thing. And second thing, whatever the problems, social problems, there are the community problems, if we at all we want to address all these kinds of the problems while acquiring the land, there is certain set of regulations are required. And I think state electricity or state regulatory committee should be assigned to that particular job so that a proper regulation can be come up so that all facility can be benefited.
Okay, thank you so much. I'll just open the floor for questions. Yes, sir.
I'm SP Dangesh, I'm from ITF, Ahmedabad. Two quick questions. First is that we are looking at a scenario where people will become energy independent. Now, energy independence will mean that you would have renewable like solar or something plus BSS. You don't require grid power. Now, in that kind of a situation, the entire land allotment policy has to be changed. Today, in most of the states, it is geared in favor of the large corporates. For example, say in Maharashtra, Gujarat, or Telangana, or Andhra, they are saying that we should be green hydrogen. Green hydrogen means 500 megawatts at one place. The point is, why don't we look at the country as a whole? You got large corporates and you got a very big MSME sector, micro, small, and medium enterprises. These are not only manufacturing. Enterprises include service enterprises also. So hospitals, schools, colleges, now all of them can be motivated to move into this particular space by an equitable land allotment policy. It should not be restricted only to large corporates. Let it be thrown open to all the MSME and all the citizens of this nation. They can get the land at the same, the kind of a level because of the fact that renewable energy is completely modular. Today, what we are driving is to replace the fossil power with, obviously huge projects, which is not efficient. Efficiency will come when we have got a combination of decentralized to a large extent with some bit of centralized. So that's a point that I would like to make, and that will solve a whole lot of problems. In Gujarat, for example, MSMEs are not permitted to put up, there may be these kinds of plants on the land that they may be able to get. So that particular thing will solve to some extent Delta Regi problem of land because there are people sitting with their own parcels of land which they will be able to utilize. Because of prosumer, the last word is that we are looking at a situation where producer and consumer are together. So we are looking at a country of prosumers, not only consumers or producers.
Thank you so much. I think it was a good point. If anybody wants to respond, we can come back to them. But I'll take 2-3 questions in first round. And if you could also introduce yourself quickly and mention who the question is pointed to, that would be helpful, sir.
My name is Purnendu Kamli. Just 2 observations. One is about the carbon observation on what you call wastelands and so on. Actually, if you look at grasslands, wastelands, the greater carbon content is not on the surface, it is in the subsoil. So we really have very little understanding of carbon sequestration in grasslands because we are not accounting for subsoil carbon conservation. The other observation I had was, why are we and who is it that is so uncomfortable with multiplicity of ownership rights? Why is it that a piece of land has to be owned by only one person? Traditionally, communities have been quite open to having multiplicity. I find that if I talk to capital, business also, they are perfectly capable of managing and understanding multiplicity of rights. The main source of discomfort is actually the government and the state, which is not able to be comfortable with having multiplicity of ownership rights. So I think this is some kind of discussion that we need to have as to why is it that this belongs to me and nobody else. How do we get out of that mindset?
Yeah. Thank you, sir. Yeah, please.
Hi, thank you for the panel, very interesting discussion. My name is Harpreet, I work on just transition, so very interested in the intersection of social justice, livelihoods and energy transition. My question is to you, sir, Mr. Mishra. You mentioned that you were able to create jobs for the local community through your intervention. Could you expand on that a little bit? Because in my observation and experience, the plants that I have visited, the skilled force that is brought in is from the outside, and the local community is hardly ever incentivized through jobs. They're very specific, unskilled jobs that bioenergy plants have provided so far to the local community. So your example is very enlightening if you can expand on that.
So thank you. This depends on the crop. If I'm doing a forestry crop plantations like Pongamia or something like which goes for 10-15 years and there is no maintenance is required. So we don't need people to be engaged regularly. But in our project, we are growing actually a hybrid grass which is called Napier grass. This is a hybrid and multi-cut, and it need maintenance. So local people has permanently per hectare wise there is many now, and they were employed them. So it's like a regular employee. They are working on the field. For the skill, obviously we need agriculture graduates. But again, from the local state, they have been recruited and deployed. But the local people, they have given a permanent employment kind of thing. 12-month employment. It's not like seasonal farmers or seasonally. Of course, the numbers are linked to the acreage and their job work. There is 500 people who can't employ only 500 people. But fair amount, 50 to 100 people are getting employed with a 200-acre kind of module. So,
Yeah. Sure.
I mean, I have interesting case, anecdotal still, but so there's Bhadla solar park and there's no solar park next to each other. Both are 1000 megawatt plus. One had the advantage of being an early starter, that being the Bhadla, and no came a few years later. Another distinction is Bhadla is predominantly Muslim and OBC, and very homogeneous in our macro understanding. We've not done detailed ground level surveys. There's no which is very very heterogeneous, right? Between the two, we saw stark contrast in distribution of opportunities, right? In NOC, we saw that opportunities and mind you, contracts are also instruments of negotiation and de-risking for companies and with negotiation with local power players, right? In NOC, we observe that their opportunities are very very concentrated, right? They are getting labor largely from outside. The Dalits are not necessarily employed within the solar economy that is emerging, right? In NOC, however, the opportunities are far more distributed. Every village that we said, now we have not verified through surveys, but said 70 to 80% of the households are being benefited from solar, right? And that has like multiple impacts, right? In terms of they have stable skill capital, human resource capital, which companies also prefer because competencies grows with time. Bhadla is also come to known as for piling experts across the country. So they are going for piling opportunities in Kavla, in Pavagada, etc. So I'm saying that social structures also have a role to play, and questions can vary in regions.
Just one more round of questions, maybe 3 questions we can take. Any other question? Yes. Yeah, Samiksha first and then
Yeah, so my question is to Nicole. I think you rightly mentioned how investors and finances, particularly international investors, can be nudged to address the issues around value. At the same time, you mentioned how land sites can be identified in, let's say, various states for addressing the issue at hand. How do you see both bridging the gap? I mean, can investors have a framework? How can they nudge the RE developers to, in the whole process of identifying land sites? Can we connect the two dots?
Thanks. I'll just take one more. Yeah, please go ahead. And I think there is Aisha here in the room from Forum for Future, and I don't know if Kaushik from Common Ground is also here. They are the co-organizers of the session. If any point that you want to make, Aisha, please go ahead. But I'll take your question and then Aisha, and then people can respond. Sure.
I'm Siddharth. I work with a company called Bamboo Circle. I head the new investors vertical there. So it's just an observation, not a question exactly. Great discussion, great panel. One of the things, I'm just trying to give a perspective of how an industry. So let's say we are talking about power over here. Let's say we talk about a compressed biogas kind of a plant. A compressed biogas plant requires agricultural residue, and then the gas gets produced. A compressed biogas it's a big plant, so it creates a lot of employment opportunities. Companies like us, do the residue collection for these CBG plants. So each plant requires 40,000 tons of agricultural residue, which means that we work with farming communities in that area. And we create employment opportunities because we take on rent their tractors. We buy machines. So any private company has to put their capex, buy machines, create those employment opportunities, and then bring back the residue which was usually burned now to the compressed biogas plant, and then the gas gets created. So we need to think about what kind of industry model. We need to look at a PPP model where the government, the private, and the rural economy or the communities are working together to bring.
Yeah, got it. One second. Aisha, you want to make?
I think you can address the question from there.
Yeah. Any other question?
Just some addition. See, this is might is right, the political will, and the government's anxiety to deliver social justice forward faster. Now, in all this interplay, the picture emerges as if this big is really the enemy of small. Jaltare Saab's example, see, I was on that side as well. We struggled to put 500 megawatts through MSMEs and with all failed tenders, one after another. And then something had to be done to put the clusters in proper shape and then deliver the daytime power to the farmers. I mean, the way is a better integration and not the abnormally, massively huge plants which really don't serve. I would very much agree with ma'am also that the small is beautiful, the local is beautiful, but it needs a centrally monitored and properly intervened model.
Right. Thank you. Nicole, you want to address the question? And yeah, please.
Thanks, Amisha, for that question. So, you're right, we should speak to each other. And as part of the Responsible Energy Initiative, what we are doing is we are creating these guidebooks and toolkits for procurer, for developer, for your investor or financier. And these toolkits would then speak to each other. So, for example, in the case of pre-siting, one is that we have a list of pre-siting questions that will help them or developer assess how risky the site is, which includes on-field visits. You cannot do this, virtually or anywhere. You have to go and ask those questions on field. And then we're using the same pre-screening tool, right? The principles from the framework, and we're going to the states. And that's what we pitch to the states. That see, we have this tool, and we can actually develop a tool with you based on your own conditions that might be specific to your state, right? Would you be willing then to ask the developers who are coming to you, who you will be giving a GO or a government order to do the project, will you be okay using this tool? So that's what we are planning to do, so that everything is comprehensive. A lot of, for example, since we're talking about pre-screening and site selection, we created a list of maybe 25 questions based on what developers were doing, but not all of them asking the same questions. So there are a few developers like Fourth Partner Inel. We use the tools that they have, created a comprehensive one, and now we are sharing it with the smaller and medium-sized developers who have no idea that they need to ask these questions when they go on field. So that's how we're trying to kind of make this comprehensive, and maybe Aisha can speak more on the initiative and beyond.
Yeah, why don't we just take it over
sure.
from there, and then in this last 2 minutes, and we'll wrap this up.
No, I think thank you everyone. It's been wonderful to have everyone kind of bring all these thoughts together. I've been hearing things about how the challenge is multi-layered, even at the land governance level, at the national level, state level, then going to panchayat, then social, economic, public information, the discourse, the lack of inclusiveness. And I was thinking how it's kind of really important to reimagine how the energy system works, not only addressing the immediate challenges that we have for energy access or economic possibilities, but also looking at how we enable social and environmental capacities around those areas. And not being any technology agnostic or not looking at what scale, but also looking at how it supports not just lives and livelihoods, but life for long term. So that's where my thought went, and I think that's what we're trying to do. We see that energy transition is happening, and we're seeing that we have a massive kind of target of 500 gigawatts, and we're trying to go fast, but it's still not fast enough. I think it's still around halfway point to 50 to 60 of installed capacity, and we're just 5 years away from it. So what does it kind of need? It kind of needs to reimagine how we look at energy systems as well, and not looking at community or social aspects as an outcome of some study or a need assessment, but actually building those models within either co-benefit models that I think Mr. Mishra and I think Nicole also mentioned something from Argentina, Global South. There's inklings and starting points of certain models where we're looking at financial transfers or skill building, or there are even examples where there are communities who are shareholders in certain regions of Africa, I think Tanzania and Kenya, if I remember the examples correctly. But how are we actually kind of changing the mindset level in India? How are we changing that ownership conflict? I think we've seen it as part of the legacy issue too, whether it's forest or now renewable energy or mining. Who owns them? What's about ownership? How can we share that ownership, and what benefit it brings to the larger people? How can we make that model people-centric? And I think that's what we are trying to do with Responsible Energy Initiative, which is an action inquiry where we're trying to ask the right questions with all the people around. It's not only just CSO, it's about industries, it's about governments, it's about learning with each other and bringing forward the questions we need to ask right now to bring an energy system of the future. So I'll close here, not taking too much time.
Thank you. And I'll just if there is any other last point that you want to make, Bhargavi, Mr. Mishra, those who spoke least. Any last point? No?
So those integrations should happen, the developers and the community and the land, so that the way forward can be addressed.
Right.
Let's roll out from the business and development.
Thank you so much, and I really thank all the panelists and speakers for being mindful of the time as well, and also making time for this session. And to the audience, it was a full house. Thank you so much for turning up for this. Please look up for each of our work, SEEP's work, CEW's work, Forum for Future's work on responsible energy, and contribute and send suggestions of what can be done better. You can check out Land Conflict Watch's work on renewable energy conflicts database. There is a database that you can check out. If you have leads from your regions where you think the conflicts is happening and we need to document, there is a link there. You can send us leads and we can document that. Even you can also document, you can tell us about positive initiatives that are working with community engagement. We would like to document that as well. So send us leads, there is a link there. And let's continue engagement for that. Thank you so much for your